In this video, we're going to talk about terms related to point of view. So let's start with some basic ideas. The narrator in a story is the voice in a work of fiction who guides the reader's perspective. A narrator may be a character in a work, or it may be a distinct representation. And we'll talk about some terms to describe both of those possibilities in just a minute. The speaker in a work, that's an analog to a narrator, but it applies to poetry. So same deal, where you've got some representation that is guiding the reader through a work, but in this case, it's in poetry versus fiction. In either case, the voice means the distinctive traits of the narrator in the text, the verbal quality of the narration. So looking at some key details of the word choice and the different ways in which the text is conveyed or the perspective is conveyed will give you a sense of the voice. So oftentimes when people are talking about literature, they assert that the author is that guiding voice. Isn't the narrator just the author? Well, in a word, no. Think about it this way. Literature is an intentional artistic representation. What that means is these narrators and these speakers, even if they seem to be the author, are really selective, carefully constructed representations. So we really want to steer clear of asserting that the author is the narrator or the speaker or the guiding presence in the text. Even if the text itself seems to assert that, we want to remember that the narrator or the speaker is just that, a narrator or a speaker, a crafted representation that is created by an author, not the same thing as an author. So let's talk about some of these types of point of view. We have first person and third person. And a good way to remember this actually is to think about it like a video game. A first person narrator is when you have a character in the text telling the story. It's like seeing through the eyes of a character who is participating in the action of the story. Third person narrators are apart from the story. They see things that are going on, but are not directly participating in what's happening. All right, let's talk about first person for a minute. When you identify a first person narrator, you want to make sure to evaluate the reliability of the narrator. And we'll see some examples of that as we look at some specific texts throughout the unit. But when you think first person, your analytical question should be, is this narrator reliable? Third person is a little more complex. There's a couple of different types of third person narrator. One is omniscient. And you may recognize that word or a related term, omnipotent, which means all powerful. Omniscient is all seeing. So this would be a type of narrator that can report on the thoughts and feelings of different characters, even when those aren't stated aloud through dialogue, that can move the reader back and forth in time or disrupt chronology in different ways. So this is a narrator who knows everything that's happening and is selecting those details for the reader to tell the story. A limited narrator will follow along a certain character, again, not being identical to that character, not a first person, but a third person narrator who sort of follows a specific character through the text. They could also follow a set of characters, a limited set of characters through the text. Either way, those characters that are followed by a limited narrator are called the focal character or characters in the text. Another couple of terms that we need to think about when we're thinking about a third person narrator are objective and intrusive. So an objective third person narrator is one that just sticks to the facts, just relates things in a very neutral sort of way, gives all of the information and doesn't render judgments on it. An intrusive narrator is just the opposite. Intrusive narrators use word choice and overt or covert means of trying to influence the reader's perspective or ideas about characters in the text or things that happen in the text. And again, we'll see some specific examples in text as we start to do our reading for the unit. But keep in mind, when you are analyzing third-person narrators, you want to determine if they're omniscient or limited, and you want to make sure to identify whether they're objective or intrusive. So that gives us a sense of the different types of narration and some of the analytical tools we have for talking about those narrators.